It was recently the 25th anniversary of the launch of one of my favorite handhelds, the Atari Lynx. So today, I'm going to review one of my favorite games on the system, Warbirds. Warbirds is a World War I dogfighting game for up to 4 players. And when you start the game, as in many simulation games of the time, you can set all kinds of parameters for the match, including the ammo, the damage model, whether collisions with other aircraft count or not, whether it's flight simulator or arcade mode. And you can also choose whether or not the aircraft start in random positions on the field, or if they start what's called a dueling start, where they face each other. You also have your choice of several missions, and these are all dogfighting missions. You know, there's no bombing campaigns or anything like that. But there's a good variety of different configurations. Milk Run's the easiest. It's you against one of the weakest AI opponents. Red Baron's pretty tough. Then you eventually get matches where it's you versus 2 or 3 other planes of varying AI intelligence. And the AI is really quite good. I haven't really gotten past something like double team. So, you know, it'll give you a run for your money. Getting into the game, it's absolutely stunning. This is a 1989 handheld, and this game really outdoes the simulators of the time that were available on big computers like the PC or the Amiga. For one, it's completely fluid. I mean, the frame rate is great. I was initially going to compare this to Wings on the Amiga, which I had really fond memories of, and I fired that one up. That's another World War I game. And the frame rate was so bad that I felt like it was nearly unplayable. Or at least not nearly as playable as Warbirds on the Atari Lynx. Aside from the frame rate, there's all kinds of polygons on the ground, and the game never really slows down, never really starts getting skippy. So it's really quite a feat. Controls in Warbirds are nicely simple. There's no throttle, unfortunately, but you can turn the engine off, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. There's, you know, one button to shoot, one button you hold down, you hit the D-pad to look around, so you can look up, left, right, and center, and you can also look at your gauges. There are more gauges than this. And flight sim mode in this game is just fantastic. They really paid a lot of attention to detail. If you read the manual, you'll see that the guy who made the game is a student of history and really is an enthusiast when it comes to World War I. It contains elements I wasn't even aware of until I played the game, such as the way biplanes use a rotary motor, so because of the way they spin, you can roll faster to the right than to the left. And it talks about how you can actually cut the engine to glide, and that way the engine's not spinning and you can bank to the left much faster. And that's one way you can actually get the jump on your opponents. And aside from that, you know, it has the usual World War I simulation elements. You know, in a biplane, you can't climb super fast. So one of the things about dogfighting is that you're often slowly gaining altitude and then deciding if you want to trade that for a maneuver. So if you do like a really crazy big maneuver, you will lose altitude a lot of the time. Or you do a split ass or a maneuver like that. Another element this game has that I really like is the cloud bank. You can lure enemies into this cloud bank, and you can lose them that way. And you have to use that really strategically, and that's one way you can actually beat missions like Double Teamed, where there's 2 biplanes after you. You know, you could go into the cloud bank and then make, say, a 90-degree turn, and really confuse the hell out of the other biplanes. And that's what I'm trying to do over here. Now, in this playthrough, I've turned mid-air collisions off. And that's partly because the AI doesn't seem to really care if they run into you, which is, you know, that can be problematic. You know, it makes the game just way harder to turn that on in a CPU match. Though I am also playing against the simpler AI opponents, so maybe the later ones don't do that as much, I'm not sure. You know, I really get the impression that Warbirds is a labor of love from the author or authors. There's just so much good detail here, a lot of historic tidbits, And even just down to the manual, you can tell that they really went all out when they made this game. Another thing that adds to the strategy is that you can land at your hangar and refill your ammo and stuff like that. I haven't really needed to do that in a CPU match, but it's really cool that it's there for the for longer matches. And there we go, I just got shot down. Yep, one victory before I bit it. Yeah, that's not super impressive. Sorry that I kind of suck at this game. So that's Warbirds, a game that I think would have been a classic had it been released on, say, the Commodore or Amiga or something, doomed to obscurity for being on the Lynx. But speaking of the Lynx, I want to talk about why it's one of my favorite handhelds of all time. Okay, so first off, starting with how the casing is, some people want to know why the buttons are so high, but it actually fits pretty comfortably in your hand, and you can flip it around for left-handed play, and every game supports this because that's in the hardware. Flipping it over, the cartridge fits in backwards, and it also has these cool non-skid rubber grips on it, which actually make it feel really nice in your hand as well. This thing was well ahead of its time. It did eat batteries, but no more so than the much more successful and less capable Sega Game Gear. And let's take a look at some of the games. It has a good selection. I like the Lynx library a lot, although it's mostly arcade games. Games that weren't arcade ports are often pretty lackluster. You know, you had Atari, which was maybe a bit out of touch at that point with what was cool. So, you know, games that are more home computery like Warbirds, Blue Lightning, or, you know, the arcade ports, Steel Talon, Stun Runner, and Road Blasters, you know, those are the good stuff. If you don't like arcade games, the Lynx is probably not your handheld system. You know, as for me, you know, when this came out, I was all about Space Harrier and Road Blasters and, you know, those 3D arcade games, and when the Lynx came out, it was kind of a dream come true. You know, over here you've got Xenophobe, which was a brilliant game that I also reviewed. Zyboss is one of the first corridor shooters, and here we have Chip's Challenge, which I'm not a big fan of, but, you know, plenty of people seem to like it, so there you go, you can play that on your Lynx as well. So yeah, you know, one of my favorite handheld systems. I feel like it's a really smart design that probably didn't succeed in large part due to Atari just not knowing what people really wanted out of consoles. You know, the people involved tend to be more from the home computer school of game design and stuff like that. So when they tried to do platformers and games like that, it often came out a bit, you know, half-assed. But the system does have some great games like Warbirds on it. So, you know, if you like that kind of stuff, check out the Lynx. You might really dig it. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.